Hi everyone, welcome to the Technology for Good show. This is Friday 21st of November and this is episode number 39. My guest on the show today is Greg Chase. Greg, how are you doing? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Greg Chase, and I'm part of the marketing team at Pivotal Software, and really excited to join you today, Tom.
So before we break into the stories, Greg, for anyone who doesn't know, who or what are Pivotal Software?
Pivotal Software is a spin-out of VMC and VMware, and we are the makers of Cloud Foundry and big data software that allows companies to generate insights and automate big data applications to create differentiating and unique business processes.
Okay, interesting. So for people who are regular viewers of the show, you'll be aware that we tend to start the show off with a typically climate-related story, which is kind of setting the scene. It's always typically bad news because there's rarely good climate news. And then we break into the good news stories and how tech is helping us, deal with some of these issues. So the first story that I saw today, climate-related, is this one from the Washington Post. And it talks about how there's growing evidence that global warming is driving the kind of crazy winters that we're seeing right now in North America, but also for a couple of years we've had some really nasty winters in Europe, in Northern Europe as well. So this one talks about how the global warming, particularly in the Arctic, has caused the jet stream to have this kind of crazy wavy shape, and how the jet stream has been weakened, and as a consequence of that, some of the kind of polar vortices have started to descend into the mid-latitudes and have some really nasty consequences for for Northern Europe and for North America. And we've seen it this week. I mean, Greg, I'm in Southern Europe, so I'm not seeing it. You're in California, so you're not seeing too much of it. But
well, we're seeing sort of the opposite of that, right? They're worried that we're going to have the extension of the drought here in California, and again, that's the jet stream in a new direction than we would ideally like it to be. But it is kind of puzzling, global warming makes places colder in the winter.
Yeah, well, I think global warming is a particularly unfortunate term because it kind of sounds nice and benign, almost. I think John Holdren, who is the scientific advisor to President Obama, said that a more accurate name would be global climatic disruption, which he's admitted doesn't roll off the tongue as easier or as easily. I've heard other people call it global weirding. Frankly, I think climate change is probably the best way to put it, because that's what it is. It's changes in the climate. The globe is getting warmer, but that's at a global scale, and that's the difference between climate and weather.
Or climatic chaos or something, but then it starts sounding like it's a movie again. But what's really interesting is how data intensive this whole process is. Thinking of that CO2 model we were talking earlier, that this is 2006 data. But
NASA released a global CO2 model which shows the movement of CO2 through the atmosphere for an entire year. And it was interesting. It was 2006 data, but it was still very interesting because you could see the peaks in the rise of CO2, where it was coming from, where it was going to, which is pretty much all over. And then you'd see it drop down concentration in kind of summertime when plants in the northern hemisphere have come into foliage and start absorbing it, and then rise again in autumn and winter. No, that was fascinating. I didn't put that in the show because, like I said, it's 2006 data, so it's a little bit out of date. I'd like to see them come up with something similar with more recent data.
And even just understanding the effects. I mean, so take like for example, Pivotal Zone data scientists. We have kind of a field trip one of them's taking, and they're blogging about it on our sites with the idea of trying to create a massive data store for understanding climate effects. And so, for example, here they're trying to track changes in bird migratory patterns, for example.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, because and it's not just the patterns of the migration, but also the dates of the migration.
And where they're moving to. I mean, that's one interesting thing I remember seeing just even in the state park here in California is they're explaining how a lot of northern species are now ending up on, or a lot of southern species are now ending up on northern beaches, for example.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, there's all kinds of unintended consequences of this. I mean, the city of Kinshasa, for example, in Africa, was built above what's called the mosquito line. So it was built at an altitude above which mosquitoes don't venture because it's too cold. But of course now the temperatures are increasing, so the mosquito line has come up and has gone past Kinshasa. So now, yeah, so now malaria, for example, is a bigger problem there than it used to be. All kinds of weird stuff. But into the good news. And speaking of Africa, we see that Africa's largest solar farm with 325,000 photovoltaic modules is now fully operational. And this is from Treehugger. And the cool thing about this, called the Jasper Solar Farm in Kimberley in South Africa, is while this is the largest one, there's an even larger one which will be coming online very soon again. And that's one of the cool things about all these renewable records, is that every time you say here's a new record in wind, or here's a new record in offshore wind or solar or whatever, the following week you're reading out another record of another win in this kind of area, and that's fantastic. And not just that, but we see this story as well from North America on how the price of solar electricity for rooftops, so that's residential solar as opposed to commercial scale, residential solar is now coming down to a point where it will be on a par with grid. So basically, the cost to deploy it on your rooftop will be similar to the price of electricity on a per kilowatt hour basis. So
you realize the difference between those two stories, though.
Yeah, go on.
So in South Africa you need a giant plant apparently, and in the U.S. you don't need a power plant. You just put it on your roof, assuming you can put enough on your roof to power your daily needs. Of course, there's also grid stability and all of the typical kinds of people say about ongoing reliability of renewables, but there's ways around that as well.
There is. No, they're two very different markets, obviously, and different both in terms of the geography and the climate, but also different in terms of the regulations. And the regulations, electrical grids are massively regulated. So sometimes the regulations are up to date with bringing renewables in, and sometimes not. And we saw situations like in Arizona where APS, the power company in Arizona, were fighting tooth and nail against rooftop solar, just because they were going to lose out. And then they turned it around and said, well, actually, we'll help you deploy rooftop solar as long as we get a cut. And what we'll do is we'll take it off your bill, and we'll own the solar, and we'll buy the power off you, and we'll incorporate it in your bill. And suddenly, when they were getting a cut, it made sense for everybody. So there's all kinds of schemes and things that can be done where the utilities, if it's not in their interest, they're looking at it wrong, or the regulations are wrong.
Ask you a question then. I mean, I'm kind of reaching way out here into outer space a little bit, but I read not so long ago Jeremy Rifkin's book, The Third Industrial Age, where basically he was saying that the 20th century was about centralization of power, if you will. We're all dependent on the grid. We're all dependent on the massive large companies that produce fossil fuels, and now theoretically, anyways, especially with internet technologies enabling this, we can take charge of our own energy needs. And I almost see these two stories as being two examples of the 20th century just being more sustainable, and 21st century where we maybe don't need to be on the grid, or we contribute back to the grid.
Yeah, no, completely. So that's the thing. The grid was architected for that kind of centralized power generation, and so are the regulations around it. And all that needs to be torn up. And I don't want to say we need to start again, but the grid needs to be digitized and made far more flexible than it is. It's very inflexible right now, but it needs to be modernized and digitized, and it needs to be able to empower prosumers. I don't like that term, but it's the best one to encapsulate what needs to happen. It needs to enable people to produce as well as consume energy. And as well as that, what we're going to start to see happen in time is that people will have a certain amount of storage, energy storage built into their homes, so that you will be able to, when electricity is cheap, suck in far more energy than you need, store it in a battery bank or some kind of storage. It might be heat, it might be cold, it might be battery, whatever. Store it some way, and then use it, utilize it for your energy needs then when the grid is under stress.
And this is where your smart grid beyond just your smart meter becomes highly valuable. You know, an interesting government program would be, I don't know if you guys have in Europe the equivalent of public utility commissions.
Not as much, but I know what you're talking about.
So if we could do that, maybe, and maybe it just simplifies down to rooftop sustainable kinds of cogeneration coupled with storage plus management of a microgrid between everything could be an interesting way to balance the two.
Absolutely, and this is where things like Internet of Things can come into their own, because up until now all this has been necessary, but it's been in the realms of, you know, science fiction almost, because there wasn't the standards and there wasn't the methods for devices to communicate and find out when they should be on and when they should be off.
And manage and automate. I remember a recent story I was just reviewing of I think it's British BC Hydro was able to find electric poachers just by looking at data streams of voltage meters and start saying, okay, well, appears to be a large draw of energy in this section of the grid that's historically uncharacteristic, and we've been able to look at the patterns and realize that's also not a result of incorrect or incorrectly operating pieces of the grid. And as a result,
sometimes they'll find that that's people who are very interested in hydroponics.
Yes, that was definitely the case. It was so I'm sure if they got the water bill, you'd have the same thing going.
People who have green fingers, what can we say? for whatever reasons. Anyway, we'll move on. There's this story that we chatted briefly about beforehand about New York rolling out free gigabit Wi-Fi in 2015, and I don't like the free gigabit in the title, because, you know, it's gigabit until 1,000 people connect, and then, you know, it's megabit. So that's a bit of a misnomer, but it's a cool idea, and it's, you know, you can see in this photograph. This stand here is what they're deploying, and it's a street side stand where there used to be phone boxes. So phone boxes now no longer needed because everyone's got a mobile. So instead, these phone boxes all have power and all have connectivity. They all have a phone line going into them. So they've turned that around, and they're rolling out in 2015. They're rolling out these devices, which will have, and what you have here in the colored area is advertising. And the advertising is going to pay for Wi-Fi that will be broadcast from these towers. So or towers, these boxes, whatever we're calling them. So these hoardings will have advertising displayed, but they'll also be broadcasting Wi-Fi, and anyone in the area will be able to use the Wi-Fi free. So it's free Wi-Fi, and it's throughout the 5 boroughs of New York. So it's a huge, ambitious project to roll out free Wi-Fi paid for by this kind of advertising for the entire city of New York. You know, I think it's an awesome idea. Like I say, I think it's extremely ambitious, but I don't see why they couldn't pull it off.
I could see they could actually make, depending on how creative they want to get with this, you know, this could be a way to make a lot of interesting money. You know, maybe you even charge more for the advertising, because guess what? You get some of the interesting data as a result of people walking by your ad with mobile devices. Now,
True.
obviously, you don't want to give away personal information on this, but you know, it could just simply be, you could start tracking, you know, how many people are in the realm. You can actually have precise numbers. How many people are in the realm of in viewing distance of your ad? How many of them are even walking towards or walking away from your ad, or stay and watch your ad?
Nice. Yeah, no, that's valuable data as well. And speaking of connectivity, Google, we've talked before on the show about their Project Loon, which is where they're using massive balloons that can go up above the height of commercial jets and broadcast internet connectivity using LTE. And so now they've been working on this for a couple of years now, and now they've got to a point where they can launch 20 balloons per day, which is a lot. It used to take them almost a day to fill 1 balloon, but now they can do 20 balloons in a day, and they can fly 10 times longer than last year. I think the current record is about 130 days that a balloon has managed to stay up and stay in contact and stay controlled. And not just that, but according to this IT Wire story, they're doing a trial with Telstra in Queensland, where Telstra is giving them spectrum, and they're trialing their Project Loon in Western Queensland at the end of this year to roll out connectivity there. So, I mean, I've never been to Western Australia. I don't know how badly they need connectivity there that couldn't be provided by landlines or fiber or whatever. I literally have no idea.
Do we? Which countries does Google actually have this deployed in yet? I've only been sort of hearing about the future of it.
Yeah, they don't have it deployed anywhere yet, apart from these kind of trials. They started trialing it in New Zealand, and now they're trialing it in Australia. So I'm not. I can see it having massive use cases in places like Africa or Southeast Asia, in places like Bangladesh, or somewhere, you know, that's pretty Himalayan, you know, very mountainous territory where it's very difficult to get landlines into, or even cell towers.
So I mean, I can see how this could be useful. So I'm researching some data for a talk I'm giving actually tomorrow about big data, and a couple of interesting things from Cisco. By 2018, there will be 7.5 billion people on the planet, but only about half of them will still have internet connectivity, or you can say as many as them will have internet connectivity. But there will be 2.5 connected devices per total human on the planet. So you're actually at about 5 connected devices per connected human by 2018.
Yeah. I know that doesn't surprise me at all. At the moment, according to Google's numbers, they say about 1/3 of the people on the planet are connected right now, and they want to use this to bring those numbers up. And
on another story, hearing about online ticketing for India Railways, their projections there are that I think there's 350 million are online in India, and in 2 years another like 200,000 or another 200 million, sorry, will be coming online in India. That's how fast it's rippling across some countries.
That's only 50% of the population in India. I mean, or not even. So something like Loon deployed in India could have, huge implications for the
Yeah.
country and for the people in the country, because when you start getting internet access rolled out like that, you start getting access to free education resources.
Yeah.
It could be some of the MOOCs that are out there. It could be some of the code academies. It could be, any kind of thing. There's enormous educational resources that are available free online, which you and I have easy access to, but, in a lot of cases, we don't need it nearly as much as a lot of people in these places do. Anyway, it's going to massively empower a lot of these countries and a lot of these peoples, and it's going to change their lives phenomenally. I fundamentally believe that, and it's not just Google who are doing it. Facebook are doing it as well, and a couple of other organizations. But fair dues to them. I know they're not doing it entirely altruistically, and they hope to profit from it too. But hey, if they profit from it, and if the people who are making use of it profit from it, then it's all good. The next couple of stories that I came across were more app related than anything else. And so the first one is staying with Google. Is about this application called Google Keep. Now, I'm iOS based, so I don't have an Android device. And Google Keep is an Android app apparently, but it's for people who use it, it's supposed to be really good. It's just a list and note-taking application, kind of like a bit like a scaled-down Evernote. But now they've rolled out a new version of it, which lets you share lists with friends and family, filter notes, do searching, all that kind of stuff as well. So apparently it's after getting turbocharged. So if you're a Google Keep user, good for you. You're just after getting a turbocharged app. If you're not, maybe it's worth checking out, because, like I say, it's supposed to be really good now. And there's a web version of it, so maybe head on over to
I think they need to rebrand,
keep.google.com.
actually.
Go on.
I think they need to rebrand, actually, because I see, especially with this ability to now share lists with people, I think the killer app is going to be husbands and wives giving each other chores, and so it should be called the honey-do list.
I can see where you're going, but I would say that would then limit it, because I mean they're talking about groups of friends who are doing maybe a weekend away together, that kind of thing. Who's bringing what? Who's bringing the beer cooler? Who's bringing the steaks? That kind of thing.
Well, in that case, then they have to include who did the actual work at the end of the weekend, so that then you can say, "I told you so."
I'm sure that's crossed their minds too. But we'll see. Like I say, it looks interesting. So if you are an Android user, maybe it's worth checking out. The other kind of news that I saw that I liked, and I have a few more app stories apart from this one. But this one, Dropbox has enhanced the accessibility options for its iOS app, and I assume. Okay, it's done it for iOS. I assume Android is in the works as well, and maybe even Windows Phone down the line. But what this is about is it's making the ability for people who are visually challenged to be able to use Dropbox, and that's a huge boon, and it's something that we tend to take for granted if we're not visually challenged. My brother-in-law is blind. He's completely blind, unfortunately, and he recently bought an iPhone 5C. And he did so because it was recommended to him by the Spanish organization called ONCE, which is the organization for blind people in Spain. And they recommend AppleKit because it's apparently really good for people who are blind or visually challenged. So he rang us the other day for the first time from his 5C, and he was able to do so because it has a load of accessibility features built into it. He was able to call up a dial pad and dial the numbers on a slate of glass where he couldn't feel the numbers, and it was the first time he was able to use a smartphone. And now, I mean, we take these kind of things for granted, and now Dropbox has added that kind of functionality to its own application as well, and I think that's fantastic.
Well, and iPhones in general have been great for accessibility. That's one of I remember the main reason my mom wanted to buy one was just because it was easier to enlarge the print on the screen and for her to read her email.
Right. Cool. Yeah. No. It, since 84 when Jobs wrote out the first Mac, that the whole mantra of Apple has been about usability, and they've taken it beyond just you and I into the realms of people who have challenges for using these kind of technologies. So that's fantastic to see. We'll move on because I saw this story as well, and I tried it out, and it's really good. Basically, I don't know if about you, Greg, but I've joined, I don't know, 8 or 10 different groups on Facebook. Some are more useful than others. None of them, curiously, are work related. And I don't know if you saw, but a couple of months back, Robert Scoble shared a video on how to make your Facebook feed more productive for your work. And it was basically, if you right-click on posts in your feed, in the drop-down, there's an option to say, I don't want to see this anymore, or posts like it, basically. So if you start doing that on all the personal posts of your friends, they will no longer appear in your main feed. You can go over to your friends in the sidebar, click on your friends link in the sidebar, and then you get to see all your friends' posts. But in your main feed, they'll no longer appear. And if you then do the opposite, and on posts which are work-related or whichever topic you want to concentrate on, if you like those and share those more often, you'll get more of those appearing in your feed. So I've done that, and my feed now is full of tech news. It's fantastic. And anytime I want to see what my friends are up to, I just click on the friends one. But there's one group that I read a lot because my main hobby is photography. I love it. I love playing with the camera. I love taking pictures. I love posting them on Flickr. And my camera happens to be a Canon 6D, which is a really good camera. I like it. I like it a lot. And there's a fantastic group on Facebook, the Canon 6D owners group, and there's about, I want to say, 7,000 or 8,000 members in the group, and it's a very active group. And if you post a photograph there, people will come back and they'll offer advice on it. It's a very positive group as well. People don't tolerate negative comments. So it's one that I was loath to, in the main feed, click on and say, I don't want to see posts like this in my feed anymore. So my feed was lots of tech news and lots of Canon 6D users' photographs. So it was kind of a curious mix. But now, because Facebook have deployed this separate application called Groups, I've downloaded that application onto my phone, and now I can go there and see all the Canon stuff there and the other groups that I'm joined as well. And I can check those out separately. And now in my main feed, I can click on those posts and say, don't show me those in the feed anymore. And now I just get the tech news in my feed. And when I want to look in and see what's happening in the groups that I'm associated with, I just use this app to do so. And it's a really nice interface, and they've done a really good job in it. So,
and the group's capabilities on Facebook, even when it was just the web, were actually very powerful, especially in terms of helping communication between group members, even local or regional-based groups. I've been involved in a couple of those where the Facebook postings of the group are in fact the best way to communicate. Now, of course, you've got two problems with that, and I don't know if this app will actually fix that. The first is there are people who will not ever sign on to Facebook, and you can't call them Luddites because now they're the trend. And the second is there's a generational gap now too, and the same group I'm speaking about doesn't get too many new members from Facebook anymore, but now they run meetups, and that's a great way to get younger, fresher blood these days. That's where younger generations are out looking for topics of interest, whether work related or not work related.
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's true, and particularly the ones, yeah, where you say there's a certain segment of the population who are not on Facebook. Either they never joined, or they joined and left because they were creeped out by some of the privacy stuff that Facebook have been doing for a while.
And again, age is right. So the teenagers these days are not using Facebook.
Yeah, they're using Snapchat or Instagram or any of these other apps. Yeah, no, that's true as well. But for those who do use it, it's a particularly good app, I think. If you're interested in groups, if you're a member of groups, it's a nice app, and I would recommend trying it out. But not just that, Facebook came out with this. Well, they haven't come out with it yet, but the speculation is there that they're making this Facebook at Work thing, which they're supposed to be launching early next year. And basically, this is a like I say, it's in the realms of speculation yet, so we'll have to wait and see what they actually come out with. But the idea is that you will now have two Facebooks. You will have Facebook for your personal stuff, and if your organization signs up to it, you will have a Facebook for your company as well. And it would facilitate collaboration, it would facilitate chat, etc., etc. But the two will be parallel, they won't intersect. So you'll have your Facebook at Work profile, and you will have your regular Facebook profile. So it's, I don't know, I'm kind of split on this one, because I know in your case, Greg, you've more than one profile on a couple of platforms.
Yep.
I've just one. I have one Twitter account, I have one Facebook account. I have two Google accounts, but that's an historic thing. It wasn't by choice. And I even when I had the two Google accounts, I generally stuck everything into one and just let the other one kind of rot away in the background unused.
Yep.
I find it very difficult to split out personal from professional, because the stuff I'm doing I'm very interested in. So for me, it's personal as well as professional.
Well, and again,
I know what it is, Greg, is it's actually probably a lack of discipline on my part. You're obviously a lot more disciplined than I am, that you can do that. I can't. So I'm not sure how this Facebook at Work versus regular Facebook would work for me.
I suppose it kind of just depends on for in your case, obviously you share a lot of information publicly anyway, so and read and consume a lot, so I could see how the behavior is basically the same in both places, whereas a lot of corporate use, there are reasons why the corporate entity may actually want control over the profile, because they want to turn you off if, for example, you're no longer at the company. There may be some access kinds of things. But interesting enough, I have another thought on this. Is there's a massive segment of the collaboration industry called social enterprise, and so this immediately comes in and starts competing against the likes of well, it's no longer Yammer, it's Microsoft now, but these kinds of capabilities, Jam, Socialcast, Tibber, but the biggest impact I see already is none of these other services can now start calling themselves Facebook for the enterprise.
This is true.
So
we're the other Facebook for the enterprise.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, I mean, my own company uses Google Apps, and this is why I have another Google Plus profile, not because I wanted one. I already have more than enough social media properties, but that is just where the apps and identity work through, and that's a work-generated identity, not me. Now, I suppose maybe if and when I move on to something else and go to another company that uses Google Apps, maybe that identity will be available to me rather than to my corporate IT, but we'll see.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I'm the same. I mean, I had that's why I said it was historic. I had my own Google account, and then I joined RedMonk, and RedMonk uses Google Apps. So I then moved all my communications from my old Google account into my RedMonk account, and that's where I do it all from now. And then the old one is, I won't say it's rotting, but I don't use it nearly as much. But it's going to be fun to watch this space and see how the I gotta think Facebook are moving into this space because the others have proven to them that it's a market that they need to be in.
I I'd be curious to get Samir Patel's view on this, but my sort of feeling on it is that the social enterprise segment had been at least stalled, and some people were considering it more of a feature of enterprise apps than actually being a segment. So I'd be curious to see how this ends up moving things through.
Yeah,
Start adding in
yeah,
things
yeah.
like the new Google Groups capability with that could be an interesting mix.
True, 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 true. We'll move on. The next one, moving out of social for a second, I saw this one that Adobe have come up with, or well, they haven't come up with it. They've partnered with Moleskine, and Moleskine make these cool notebooks that so many people use. I don't. I'm. So there's this whole kind of retro chic thing about carrying notebooks around and scribbling in them, and that's not me. I'm. I when I was in school as a kid, I had atrocious writing, and I remember one of my teachers, my English teacher, Mr. Young, at the time, telling me that my writing looked like I had dipped a tame spider in a bottle of ink and let him run across the page. And he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. My writing is appalling. It always has been. And it's gotten worse over the years because I don't write anymore. So in '89, I got my first computer and discovered the keyboard. And since then, I've hardly written anything. That's not quite true. I graduated university in '91, so all the exams were written. But from '91 on, I've hardly written anything, and I've almost no muscle memory left in my fingers now for writing. Um, the only time I write now is when someone asks me to sign a credit card slip or sign into a hotel or something like that. And I hate having to do that. I hate having to fill out forms with a pen because my writing is still atrocious. It's worse now because I don't practice. So the idea of this moleskin thing that people go around with a notebook and a pen or a pencil, it's anathema to me completely. But I know loads of people do it. So for me, this story holds no interest for me. But I know a load of people, like I say, do this. So I think it is an interesting story. And like I say, what it is it's the ability to digitize the stuff that you put into notebooks. And this has been done before with smart pens, but what this does is the file that it creates from the digitization of what you scribble is a file that goes in as a JPEG, and it goes up to Creative Cloud both as a JPEG and as an SVG file.
Mm.
So you can use it. You can open it straight away in Photoshop and start messing with it, or you can open it in Illustrator as an SVG file and start messing with it. And I think that for particularly for people who like doodling, that makes it incredibly interesting. I gotta think.
I have an industry take on this actually, and I just think of how Adobe has transformed as a software company. And it wasn't that
That's
long
true as
ago
well.
when everything was shrink wrap software to put on your usually Apple, but the PCs as well, and that was their primary business, and kind of a stagnant one that nobody wanted. And they have managed to really transformed to a cloud-based subscription company so much now that now they're tying in the Internet of Things, whereas plenty of other, I'll say, stale enterprises are still struggling, going, what do we do with this cloud stuff and Internet of Things? I have no idea what that is. So
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I think Adobe is one of those companies you can really say has made that cloud transformation. And look at the business model, and look at the value, and look at the experience they provide their customers as a result.
Yeah, no, they've done a pretty good job, I have to say. The whole Creative Cloud thing that they've put together. seems to have taken off. People seem to like it. I don't use much Adobe software. I use Premiere Pro when I'm doing video stuff. I use Lightroom all the time because it's a photography application. It's for photo management. But I don't use the Creative Cloud aspect of it yet. I used a little bit of InDesign last year when I was putting a book together. And that was interesting. And I need to go back and do a bit more work on that book. I mean, I need to produce a version 2 of it because I produced the book and got it published and the whole thing.
Plug your book. What's it about?
No. It was a personal project. It was a present for my dad.
Oh yes.
But I need to produce a version 2 of it, and if I do, I'll go through the Creative Cloud version of InDesign, I think, because that'll be an interesting project just to learn about that. And there's a possibility I'll be producing another book next year, a professional one. I won't talk about it yet because it's still very much in the realms of speculation. But if I do, InDesign would be the perfect tool for that. Anywho, we'll move on. The next story that I saw was more well, I guess this one is the Adobe one, and the Moleskine one is kind of Internet of Things-ish kind of at a stretch, but the next one is very much in that space, and it's this company called LittleBits, and LittleBits is interesting because they've put together tiny little modules that clip together magnetically, and they, one of the bits that you clip in magnetically will attach to a cloud, another will be a USB power, another will be an LED screen, another will be, so you clip these modules together bit by bit, and you kind of create a chain of functionality which you can then control from a smartphone from wherever. And they have now produced a kit that you can buy so that you can start controlling your house, for example, because this is a house-friendly kit. You can start controlling your house when you're not there. And they have a number of videos in this about things like doorbell answering, about this one is about feeding a cat. They have another one about listening for dogs barking, and if the dog barks X number of times, then you can have it do something. It fits in with IFTTT, so that you can do an if this then that kind of thing. So you can, if the dog barks more than 20 times, you can have an SMS sent to your phone so that you're aware of it, so that you can do something, and all these kind of things. The kit is $250. Which may or may not be too much for some people, but if you're trying to get into a bit of IoT programming, it looks like a nice, easy entryway. Shell out the $250, and you can start to do some little cool projects around your house. And if you've got kids, it's a nice way in. Now, I'm coming at this from a bit of a bit of background. So I was at the SAP Tech Ed events in Las Vegas and Berlin in the last number of weeks. And while I was there, I chatted with a guy called Craig Schmeichel and a couple of the guys on his team. And they were doing IoT demos. And they did some really cool ones. And I have a blog post in the works about this that I'll be pushing out the next week. And one of the things they did was they built a scarecrow, for example, and the scarecrow could move its arms and move its head, and it had attached a Nerf gun. So I've got a video of this, and you could control the scarecrow using Twitter. So you could tweet to the scarecrow, and it would follow commands that you tweeted at it, for example. So I have a video of it. They tweeted at it, and the eyes flashed with LEDs, the head moved, the arms moved, and then it fired the Nerf gun. So I have a video of that, and all of that is simple programmable stuff using things like Arduino or BeagleBone microcontroller boards and sensors and things like that. So the blog post I'll be putting out will be talking about this kind of thing, the kind of thing that Little Things is doing. But Little Things have done it really well, really polished, foolproof almost. There are kits, though, that you can buy for the likes of the Raspberry Pis and the Arduinos and the BeagleBones, and I'm going to be listing these in the blog post, which are not nearly as polished. And it's going to be fun. I'm going to get some of these, and I'm going to start, trying to piece little projects together and coding using command lines and seeing what I can actually get done. I'm going to bring my kids in on it, and we're going to have fun doing this over Christmas and stuff. But I don't know. It's kind of a, do you want to go the polished route where everything is very easy and very straightforward, or do you want to get down and dirty and start fiddling with wires and things like that? And for me, I think the whole maker culture and the whole fiddling with wires and breadboards and things, I think that's going to be a bit more fun.
Well, it's where do you want the focus on? If soldering is the technique you want to look at, that's one thing, versus LittleBit's the advantage of having that kind of design to the components is now it becomes more a design the solution you want to do and do the programming. I think is where they shift the focus.
Yeah, you see. Well, there's a couple of things there. So. With obviously with the little things, there's no soldering involved, obviously. So it's very for just magnetic clips, things together, blah blah blah. It's like I say, it's very polished, works very well, but it's also limited in what you can do with it because it's so highly polished. You don't get as many sensors, and they can only go in certain configurations and things like that. Whereas when you buy one of the other kits, which are a fraction of the price, they may be 1/5 of the price. So like $50, $50 to $80 for a big kit. It's not soldering because you get a thing called a breadboard, and basically with this thing called a breadboard, you just stick the wire into it, and then you stick it into the microcontroller in a kind of a duct which is particular for it in the microcontroller. So you don't actually need to do any soldering, which is good because I've done soldering and I don't have a problem with that, but I don't want to be teaching my kids soldering. I don't know how useful that would be for them, and if they don't need to do it, then that's fine. And the fumes that come off solders, is something I'd prefer to keep them away from for another few years yet, anyway. So the soldering aspect that's moot. But when you get these other kits, the possibilities are, I won't say infinite, but they're far greater. You can do far more things, I think. I mean, I could well be proven wrong. I'm going to try it and see what happens anyway.
Well, it's an interesting alternative to buying your kids a Mindstorm robot, because now you can kind of just do interesting things around the house. Now, if they add things like actuators and other kind of commandable automation in addition to just sensing, then
yeah, totally. So we'll move on. I saw this, and I'm skipping a few stories here because way too many stories and far too little time left. But I saw this one I thought was an interesting one coming out of Telefonica. And Telefonica are the mobile operator here in Spain, but they also have a huge presence in South America. And they've talked to an Israeli mobile infrastructure company called Evolution Networks. And what they've done in South America is they've used the Evolution Networks software to basically put some of their infrastructure to sleep at nighttime when it's not needed. So I think it's a fantastic and a very simple idea. During the day, when we're all up and about and we're all working and we're grabbing the phone and we're making calls and whatever, you obviously need full network capabilities. But after midnight, probably even after 10 p.m., the amount of calls is going to crash. It's going to, completely collapse. So I would suspect the amount of calls at 2 a.m. is probably at least an order of magnitude less than at 6 p.m. So you don't need to have all that infrastructure powered up and sitting there waiting for calls that are never going to come. So the idea is that this software puts to sleep the infrastructure that's not required and then ramps it up again as it's needed. And the power savings in that must be immense. They don't go into it here in any detail, unfortunately, in this GigaOM article, but I would love to find out the kind of savings that they are getting or expect to get from it, because that must be huge.
I mean, it's one of those things where it seems like one would be surprised they're not already doing that, unless the Hibernate software for cell phone towers maybe was about as reliable as the old PCs of previous years. I'm happy to say my Hibernate on my MacBook Pro works much better.
Yeah, likewise. So we'll keep pushing on through. That was a pretty straightforward one. The next one I thought that was very interesting was this Swedish ISP protecting customers from surveillance with a free VPN, and that's I mean, again, very simple story. Basically, the company were being hit with a data retention law, which was saying they had to hold on to the information of the customers. So they said, well, actually, what if we give all the customers a VPN connection? Then we don't have any, or the data we have is completely encrypted. It's useless to anyone. So they've done that. They're rolling out free VPNs to every single customer of theirs. And now it means that their customers' data, like I say, it's completely encrypted. So there's nothing they can share with the authorities that gives anything away. It seems like a beautifully simple solution, and it's the kind of one where you kind of go, why isn't everyone doing this?
Well, it's an interesting idea where suddenly the companies are realizing that it's not in our interest to hold the data, not in ours, not in our customers, and so therefore, not only do we not keep the data, but we in fact make it impossible for us to keep the data.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like the Apple with iOS 8 and the Android with Lollipop being encrypted by default. It's again, you kind of think, and I mean, you have to say none of us would have been talking about this if it wasn't for Snowden's revelations last year. Kudos to the man. I mean, he, I think he single-handedly made all the conspiracy theorists look conservative. And,
well, and he brought. I use this example all the time. I think he also helped us understand privacy better. It's not just my social security number and my credit card number or my address. It's also what are the stuff I'm doing, what are the tracking, what are the things that are outside my direct control that people can actually use to find out a whole bunch of information about me.
Yeah. And staying on security, we see that WhatsApp is now rolling out end-to-end encryption using open source text secure code. So basically, any texts you send using WhatsApp, now one quick what's the word I'm looking for? I've forgotten. One exception to this, it's a big exception, is that this is for now Android only. So if you are on Android, then you get full end-to-end encryption for any of your messages in WhatsApp. I would assume that an iOS equivalent will come out reasonably soon. I mean, I don't see why they would just do Android, so I assume the iOS one is in the works, and they just got the Android one out the door or through Google Play faster, and maybe it's taking a while to go through the iOS App Store. I don't know, but either way, even if it is just Android, it's still very good for WhatsApp users who are on Android. The next one will stay with security, and the next story is a really interesting one again, and it's how the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Group, have gone together with Mozilla to encrypt what they're saying is the entire web by giving away free HTTPS certificates. And why that's interesting is because it means that anyone who owns a domain, and I don't know about you, Greg, but I own a number of domains, anyone who owns a domain that they have a web property on can take advantage of this. They can apply for and get a free cert through this organization that's being set up. What's they've got a certificate authority. They're setting up a certificate authority called Let's Encrypt. And okay, anyone can set up, well, not anyone, but you know, it's not too difficult to set up a certificate authority. What's difficult is to get that certificate authority recognized by the main browsers. But this Let's Encrypt certificate authority, because one of the people who are setting up is Mozilla, means it'll be recognized straight away by anyone using Firefox. And you got to think, if Firefox, if Mozilla and the EFF are involved, then you're going to get Google wanting to join in as well and recognize the certificate authorities, and then Apple will as well.
That's like the way to handle this is actually to include a or put this together with a Swiss ISP VPN initiative.
Oh yeah, very good. So I mean, again, this is all post Snowden stuff that would never have happened, I think, had these revelations not come out. And the fallout from it, basically, is tremendously positive for all of us, because we are getting far more initiatives like this. We're seeing every day new secure text applications. We're seeing more initiatives to make browsers and sites more secure, and now we're seeing the ability to get free HTTPS certs, which was a big block for a long time. It was not easy to get a cert. You had to jump through a number of hoops, and the ability now to get these free, that's huge. I think this is a really interesting announcement. We'll keep going. And more in the security space, there's a new, I don't know if you want to call it an application. It's a new release by, again, the EFF are involved in this. It's an Amnesty International as well. There's a group of human rights groups who have come together to produce this thing called Detect. And it's for finding known spyware packages. So, it's like any of these antivirus applications that you get. They're only as good as the most recent signatures that you downloaded. So the same thing with this Detect application. It's supposed to be able to find spyware, which is great. The disadvantage, obviously, is that this is always going to be a game of leapfrog. And there will always be new spy or malware out there which it won't find. And the article goes into some detail on that, saying that it won't find 100% of everything. The other big downside of it is it's Windows only. Now, I went through the sites and I went through to.
So we're most badly needed.
Yeah, true. But there are a significant number of people on Linux. And also on iOS, not iOS, OS X. And there's no mention on the site, not just on this release, but on the site for the Detect software, that there's no mention of any other platforms. So I don't know, are they planning to release it for other platforms and haven't gotten around to it yet, or are they just not going to support those? So, I mean, for anyone who thinks they might be a target and have a Windows machine, this is great. I mean, they can go download it, have the machine scanned, and find out if the most common malware stuff is on their machine. And if it is, this isn't a removal tool. It's just a scanner. It will just find if it's actually there, and if it's there, alert you to the fact that it is there. And if it doesn't find anything, it doesn't mean you're clear. It just means you're clear of the ones that it knows about. Finally, and I say finally because not because I'm on the last story, but I'm on the last section of stories. We've got another 5 stories, and we've got about 2 minutes, so we're not going to get through them in any detail, but I'll flash them through anyway. So there's a device called a Ditto, D-I-T-T-O, and it's just this kind of little pebble-shaped device which has been released It doesn't have any buttons, no display, no lights, weighs 8 grams, and all it does is it vibrates to let you know when something important is happening. And basically, what they say about this device is, you put it in your pocket, or you put it somewhere where you will feel the vibration coming from it. They actually mentioned that for women users, it might fit quite nicely on a bra strap where it's not seen but you can feel it. And you can program it from your mobile device to vibrate at a very granular level. You can say, okay, if a message comes from this one person, then vibrate. Ignore all other notifications. Or from this group of people, or this notification from this person in this application, or this from this person in that application. So you can control at an extremely granular level what notifications you get. So particularly important, I imagine, if you're in an important meeting and you don't want to pull out your phone every time it lights up, you don't want to be looking at the screen. So you can just turn your phone face down or leave it in your pocket, and then be assured that only the important notifications will vibrate. So very nice.
I'm all for that, because if you think about today's technology, most of it is about nagging you and tweeting you and sending you notifications. And if what you can tell me is I can turn everything off and only program the ones that really matter. And I was thinking about an article I recently read that was quoting Mark Weisner, a computer scientist out of 1991, where he said the most profound technologies are those that disappear. And I will tell you that today's mobile phones do not fit that.
No, quite the opposite. They're flashing the whole time in your face, and if something like this can make a lot of that go away, I think it's a great idea. We'll keep going. Wearables at a crossroads. So this is an article written by a guy I know called Dennis Howlett, and lots of people who watch the show will probably be familiar with Dennis, and I think you know him as well, Greg. So I was having a conversation on Facebook about wearables, and I happened to mention I was looking for a smartwatch which tracks heartbeats, footsteps, sleep, but it must also be able to share that information with other applications such as Apple Health. And I posted that on Facebook, and it led to a conversation on Facebook about wearables and how they don't share information well, and that set Dennis off on this topic, wondering, are wearables at a crossroads? And he talked about battle lines and fashion wars, and basically the article is saying that it's an iOS versus Android issue. And I can see that to an extent, but I don't necessarily agree. I don't, because if I look at the kind of wearables that I'm interested in, and I've said before, I have a Fitbit Force, and that doesn't allow me to pipe the information into Apple Health. But not alone does it not allow me to pipe it into Apple Health, it doesn't allow me to pipe it into Google Fit either if I had a Google Fit device.
Well, if you think about the market on this too, all the successful Kickstarters on this, it's really been about some, sure, you get some residual benefit of tracking, but it's really about a fashion statement or a hardware design in a lot of cases. And only now are we starting to ask questions like, what can we do with all this data? Because I can't think of a doctor that can use any of your biometric data, all this detail that normally
and that's precisely what Apple Health is there for. It's there so that you can share it with your medical practitioners. That's the whole idea behind it, and that they have a huge number of medical people involved in the development of Apple Health, and yet these wearables companies, to a large extent, are blocking you from entering that data into Apple Health. They won't allow you to do it. They won't let you do it. And that's not a platform play. That's not an Android versus iOS thing. It's what it is it's these companies who hold this information, who want to be a walled garden. They want to keep that information for themselves, and if they have that information, then they have you as the user. They have you captured, and that way they'll never lose you as a customer. And I think I'm absolutely the opposite.
Having talked with
this, if I can't get the information out, I'm going. And if I can't get the information out, that's it. I'll go to somewhere where I can start from scratch and get the information out of there. So I've been looking at it, and Fitbit don't seem to be supporting it. And there is, we'll come across it in a second, but there is another application. Actually, I flashed up on screen quickly now. There's another application which I came across today, which is written by third parties, which allows you to, buy this 99-cent application, and that allows you to export your data out of Fitbit and into Apple's health application. Now, that's all well and good, but that's not the right way to do it, because it's a third party, and Fitbit could shut off their application or shut off their access to the application in a second, and then the usefulness of that is gone. And knowing Fitbit, that's quite likely what they'll do.
So having met some software engineers from some of these wearable companies, a lot of times, again, the company founders are focused on the hardware aspect to it, and it's not so much that they are trying to protect the data from third-party use. I don't know, in many cases, they understand the value of the data and how making data accessible, in fact, increases the value of their offering to their customers.
So you're saying it's more incompetence on their part rather than them
Focus.
trying to build data walls.
We'll call it focus. If what we're trying to do is put more sensors and more hardware and more bling into our wearable, and aren't thinking about the what do you do with all this data, and what are the long-term applications of it, then you're going to be thinking differently, right?
Yeah, I guess.
We don't want people buying Apple hardware. We want people buying our hardware.
And yet, when you go into, and we'll talk about this next, when you go into the likes of Basis, and Basis makes some interesting devices, and they've come up with a new one called the Basis Peak, which measures heart rate in real time, and they're releasing an update for their software which will allow it to work with third-party applications. Only a number of them. But when you go into the forums for Basis, there are a load of people asking why you can't. Why you can't share the information from Basis with Apple's HealthKit. Now, what Basis have announced just in the last couple of days is that they will be able, that people who own a Basis Peak, I don't know if it applies to the older ones, but people who own the Basis Peak will be able to share their data with these 3 applications at least. Strava, Runkeeper, and Endomondo. And I was interested in that. And I went and I had a look on the web store at the App Store at Strava, Runkeeper, and Endomondo. And of those 3 applications, one of them, and that's Strava, one of them allows you to share data with Apple's HealthKit. So I'm wondering, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm wondering if now I can take data from a Basis Peak, pipe it into Strava, can Strava then take that information which came from Basis, can it pipe it into Apple Health? Because Strava says it can pipe its information into Apple Health, so if it's gotten information from somewhere else, it should be able to pipe that into Apple Health as well. I don't know, but it seems to me that might be a workaround for this situation. I can
see though where the winners on this are actually going to be, and it's not going to be on even. It's not even really a matter of does my wearable fit to this service or that service. The data collecting service that can put together healthcare professionals with machine learning to add tremendous value and diagnostic capabilities and even management capabilities out of the data that's being collected. The people who can assemble that are going to be able to dictate which wearables that participate will have market.
I just got a DM from someone telling me that SAP has a 10% stake in Fitbit. Were you aware of that?
News to me.
I didn't know either, so that's interesting. I don't know. We'll see how it all works out. The last story that we're going to talk about today is a Kickstarter campaign from a company that have produced this or are producing this thing called Hush. And basically, what it is it's a kind of a listening device over here on the right with a set of earphones. They set a goal of 100,000 for funding on Kickstarter. They still have 33 days to go, or had on November 19th, so we're on the 21st now, so 31 days to go. At time of writing of the article, they'd reached 137,000 of their 100,000 that they were looking for, so they blew past it. What do they do? Well, the listening device listens to ambient noise, and then the earphones that you're wearing, they're in-ear earphones, they cancel out that noise. So if you're a light sleeper, like I am, I'm a very light sleeper, and you had these in your ears, they cancel out all noise. If there's traffic on the street, if there's people shouting, parties, noisy neighbors, noisy partner, it cancels out the noise, you don't hear anything, and there's a good chance that you will actually get a restful night's sleep. It sounds intriguing. I don't know if it's...
I'm thinking... Put this together with your LittleBit home automation kit, and you can deal with the morning dog or cat alarm, and it will automatically feed them, and you'll get another half-hour of sleep.
You see, as a dog owner, right there, perfect. I would have said the kids, but so I'll have my little things feeding my kids, and you have it feeding your dogs, and we're all set for the weekends.
Yes.
Awesome. That's it. As usual, we've run over time. I'm useless at this. But it's been interesting. There's been a lot of good stories. I had to skip a few of them, but we had far too many stories this week, as usual. Greg, thanks a million for coming on. It's
Tom, that's really fun. I hope we'll have a chance to do this again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for everyone who joined and was watching and sent me a couple of messages and tweets and retweets and things, thanks for all that. And we'll be back next week with another show. We hope to see you all then. Have a good week, and see you next week.